5 project ideas for you to execute to take your profile to the next level. And then finally, no matter what shape, size of the project you do, one of the most important things is your ability to be able to explain your project in plain English, in deep technical depth. You should be an expert in both of these ways of explaining your project. In 30 seconds, in 2 minutes, have a 15-minute detailed discussion about it. You should know your project inside out. My name is Savinder Puri and I have been in the build, release, DevOps, software engineering area for over 2 decades. Along this time, I've had the opportunity to work in India, US, UK, Europe, South Africa. I've kind of been around the room. You can check out my LinkedIn profile to know more about my credentials. The comment target for this video is 100 comments. The like target for this video is 200 likes. So strap on your seatbelts. Let's get started. Hello girls and boys, how's it going? So let me start today by telling you a couple of success stories. A third-year engineering student finds a vulnerability flaw in NASA's website and receives a recommendation letter from them. Another third-year student cracks an internship and a full-time job at a security company because he contributed to their source code. 6 people, freshers, crack their jobs because they directly reach out to their founders. And 3 people make career pivots into cloud and DevOps. Do you know what is common in all of these examples? Number 1, of course, they had the passion and the drive to make it happen. But number 2, more important than that, they had the right projects to showcase their expertise when the right time came. And that is what we will talk about in this videos. 5 project ideas for you to execute to take your profile to the next level. For each of these projects, I will talk about the solution approach, what the project showcases, open source, references, and then some resources to build the projects. We will start with the simpler projects and then the subsequent ones will be more complicated. The 4th project is my favorite. Now this is an AWS based 3-tier architecture, full-blown architecture which uses infrastructure as code from Terraform. It uses Docker, it uses GitHub Actions, CI/CD pipeline, the whole mumbo jumbo. And in the end, I have a bonus for you. I talk about the CNCF project list, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation list, where you can select a bunch of products and I'll tell you how you can contribute to them, how you can become a mentor there. Even if you are a fresher, even if you have never done an open source contribution, this is a fantastic place which will make your profile into the international level and bump up your profile 100x. So do watch till the end of this video. Okay, so before we dive into the project list, there are 2 things that you should know about. First one is, what are the qualities of a great project? So if you're deciding which project to pick up to showcase in your profile, check these things in the project. Number 1, the project has to solve a real world problem. Whether a small problem or a big one, it has to solve something. For example, it shouldn't be a library management system. This is a project which we have been doing for donkey 20-30 years. Don't do those kind of things. Even if you pick up a smaller problem with real world application, that is also fine. Second one, the project has to be hosted somewhere on a live environment, and that link you should be able to provide in your resume so that the interviewer can click on it and experience the project. It shouldn't be a description in your project, in your resume. Nobody cares about that thing. Nobody reads that. So live project hosted somewhere with an accessible URL. The third thing, most important, the code for this should be available in GitHub. Again, a link will be provided in your resume. Also, if possible, if you can show a bunch of folks of your project which means people are using it, nothing builds credibility like a forked project. And then finally, no matter what shape, size of the project you do, one of the most important things is your ability to be able to explain your project, one, to your mother-in-law, and two, to a technology architect person. In plain English, in deep technical depth. Two perspectives to explaining your project. You should be an expert in both of these ways of explaining your project. In 30 seconds, in 2 minutes, have a 15-minute detailed discussion about it. You should know your project inside out. So these are a couple of things to check about a good project. Now, couple of things which do not make a project good. Next is a list of what is not a great project. Number one, a project that smells of AI. What do I mean? The project description itself, when you read it, you figure out nobody has written this is AI generated stuff. Also, because the project is AI generated, most probably you will not be able to explain the project in a whole lot of great detail, especially the source code, because you have no freaking idea what the source code does. Don't do those kind of things. They don't help. Number two, it shouldn't be a clone of an open source project with just minimal text or message changes. That is not acceptable at all. Of course, you can take an open source project, make some meaningful modifications in it, change the technology stack. That is perfectly okay. That is perfectly acceptable. But don't just take an open source project and call it your own and put it in your profile. Any intelligent interviewer will be able to figure that out in 2 minutes. All right, let's get into it. So the project number one is a weather app, and it's a fairly simple project. You get a drop down box and you put in the city's name, and then it tells you the weather on that. Now, what is the solution approach to this? It's a basic web application that is hosted on an Amazon EC2 instance that displays weather information. You can use a free weather API to grab that data from anywhere. Now, what does the project showcase? It showcases your understanding of EC2 instances, the web server configuration, the security groups, and then how to deploy a real world application on an AWS infrastructure. So pretty basic, but it gets your job done. This is one of a good first ones. If you're an absolute beginner, a fresher, this is a good one to start with. Alright, so let's start with the first one, which is the weather dashboard app. And you can see a simple web app allows to search weather and retrieve the weather data from open weather map, right? So let's look at the deployed URL. This is how it will look like. Let's say if I say Pune here, search, there we go. Pune and the weather for the next 5 days. Okay. And you can see the app here. It says the user story, acceptance criteria, very nicely done. And then the mockup and the technologies used is Bootstrap app and the Open Weather API. So this is the second one. It uses React, Leaflet, Chart.js, and built on Travis CI. Now obviously you don't have to do Travis. You can do Jenkins or anything that you want. Let's look at this one. Instead of Shenzhen, let's look at the weather in London. There we go. So this has map integrated with it, something more cooler, something with a lot more detail. You see this Travis YAML file, a simple one, gets the source from GitHub token, and simple one. Okay, so this is about project one. Okay, so project number two is something called a URL shortener. If you've heard of bit.ly, what it does let's say you want to share your LinkedIn profile with somebody, or you want to share a big URL with somebody. Instead of pasting that big URL, you go to bit.ly, paste that URL, and it converts that into a tiny URL. It's called a URL shortener, right? Which will be 3, 4, 10 characters, right? Very easy to share. So a clone of bit.ly. Not a clone, but an equivalent of bit.ly, which is called a URL shortener. And you create this on AWS serverless. What's the solution approach? You set up an AWS Lambda function to generate and shorthand the URLs. You use API gateway to expose the Lambda function as a REST API. And then the third thing, you store the URLs in a DynamoDB with expiry settings, because your URL will expire within 5 hours, 10 hours, 2 days, something like that. What will this project showcase? It will showcase your capabilities in serverless computing, Lambda functions, API gateways, and DynamoDB. Now let's go to project 2, the URL shortener, the serverless URL shortener, right? S3, Lambda functions, DynamoDB, all of that stuff. Okay, and let's see this. Okay, it's not working. That shouldn't happen. Okay, but anyways, this is not deployed it, he's taken it down probably. It tells you about the components, how do you set up stuff, DynamoDB, and a lot of details around that. How do you create Lambda functions and all of that. So this is the second project. Alright, now project 3, this moves into GitHub Actions now. So it's GitHub Actions with Docker, Docker registry, Kubernetes, and Helm charts. So what's the solution approach? You use a Docker for everything, including creating your product libraries, bundling up your binaries. You use ECR to store your container registry. You use EKS for running the Kubernetes system. And then you use an Helm chart for the declarative pipelines. What does this project showcase? It showcases an end-to-end mature DevOps pipeline using the Docker and the container system using EKS. Okay, project 3, which is the GitHub Actions thingy. Sample application for CI/CD demonstration of GitHub Actions with Docker, ECR, Helm chart, blah blah blah, all of that. And you can see here the introduction. This guy has a DevOps start accelerator for startup, lot of things underneath this, but that is not what we are worried about. What we need is this open source thing, right? So have a look here. He's given the Docker ignore all the files here. Let's look at deploy, the Helm chart. Yeah, so simple environments, and uses app.yaml. Let's see app.yaml also. This will also be fairly straightforward. The region, ingress, it uses this charts cloud compose URL, which I'll show you in a minute. It has a rolling update as well. And if you see in the ingress, these are the external URLs that it is using. Let's look at this URL as well. Okay, incubator specified key does not exist. Okay, ठीक है, किया नहीं उसने. That's fine. Okay, so have a look at this, have a study of this. I found this a good one, and it explains in a whole lot of detail on what he's doing about here. Alright, project 4. This is my favorite one. It's a complex one. It's an AWS based 3-tier highly available web app using Terraform for infrastructure as code, using Docker to create the containers, and GitHub Actions to create the CI/CD pipelines. So what's the solution approach for this? So basically you create a Flask app, which is a simple game, a Moneyball game, and you push it to AWS ECR, Amazon Container Registry, right? So you containerize that app, push it to the container registry, you deploy the infrastructure using Terraform modules, then you provision EC2 instances and pull the latest Docker image and run it. And finally, you will have a container running Flask app on an EC2 instance behind an application load balancer. What will this product showcase? Everything. Infrastructure as code, AWS resources using VPC, Elastic IP, NAT gateway, Internet gateway, load balancer, the whole jing bang around infrastructure and networking on AWS. It also talks about RDS and Elastic Cache. You also get to experience about DynamoDB to store the state file and to lock it, and then security groups, GitHub Actions for CI/CD. What does this showcase? The whole 9 yards of DevSecOps on AWS. Okay, so project 4, deploying the AWS 3-tier application using Terraform, Docker, all of that stuff. Now this is the architecture that he is set up here. So GitHub Actions, it invokes Terraform, it puts the state file in the S3 bucket, lock ID, and basically within a VPC there are 2 subnets, one bastion host using which you are going in, which is your primary route, your web server 1 and your RDS, and then this is on a load balancer, similar on the other side as well, and there is replication happening across the 2 RDSs. Okay, so this is a complex one, but it's a very good one if you can set it up correctly. It talks about the entire project description, what technologies they are used. Then it also clearly calls out the access keys that you will need, AWS credentials, all of that. And it also gives you details. This is a video on GitHub Actions by Tech World by Nana. It explains in a whole lot of detail. So it's a pretty good one to deploy. Also on this, here is another URL which has GitHub Actions workflows. And you can see a bunch of workflows. Deploy to EKS with Argo CD and Helm, deploy to EKS with Helm charts, environments, how to build Docker images, how to promote Docker images, Terraform chat ops. So there are a lot of projects in this. You can have a look at this one as well. Alright, now project 5, it is on the Azure Native Labs. Now I'll show you a bunch of projects on Azure which you can pick up, starting from the simple ones to more complex ones. I'll show you that list right now. And then the 5th one, which is Cloud Native Labs. So this is on the Azure side now. This has a bunch of collections. So you can say Azure Container Services, which has the serverless container with Go, then your container apps, GitHub Container Registry. Then you have a bunch of projects with Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, then event-driven services, a whole lot of things which you can experiment here. This is a great resource for stuff if you want to do it on the Azure side of things. And then I spoke about a special mention, which is the CNCF projects. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, if you look at it, Argo is obviously a CNCF project. So is Envoy, FluentD, etcd, Helm, Itch.io. All of these are their graduated projects. And then you'll see incubating projects also. So Backstage, which is your IDP, it is in CSCF project now. Cloud Custodian, which is automation and configuration. Dragonfly, the container registry. Crossplane, which is for scheduling. All of these are CNCF graduating projects now. So let's say we look at one, let's say Crossplane. Okay, I had opened up Argo. You can see a lot of stuff here. Crossplane, let's look at view project website. No, this is the full-blown project website. This is not what I was looking for. How do you contribute to projects? Okay, yep. So you can contribute to a project, you can maintain a project, or once you have the knowledge, you can do mentorship programs. Open source for beginners, some terms. Then they have technology advisory groups, which are groups focused on specific products. And then they have ambassadors where if you have knowledge about CNCF, you can promote that. So these are the project lists. These are the primary languages. You can see Go is fairly popular here. And this talks about a lot of things, how do you start contributing to open source? How do you join the community? How to understand the community better? How to choose a project? It talks a lot about all those things. And then you have the project guide, community governance. Yeah, you can read through this, but it will be a step-by-step process on how you can start contributing as a first-time contributor and then maintaining a project. So yeah, read through this, but the CNCF is definitely a great place to go through that. Alright, hope this video made sense. I've tried to share a lot of information in under 20 minutes, and all of these links will be put up in the description. I will share that with you. Let me know what made sense in this video, and I'll also link the other video where I've taken a podcast with these two guys who got selected from campus interviews while being engineering students. I will link it here, and I'll see you in the next one.